Big Mac Talks.
Earlier today, it was released that the Toronto Raptors agreed to a trade that would send OG Anunoby to the New York Knicks for RJ Barrett, Immanuel Quickley, and a second round draft pick. In the trade, the Knicks also received Precious Achiuwa and Malachi Flynn from the Raptors. When looking at this trade on the surface, I think the immediate feeling is that the Knicks got robbed as they essentially gave up two top 25 players at their respective position for one top 15 to 20 player at his respective position, but that is not necessarily the case. I would say that immediately declaring this deal a steal for the Raptors is a bit premature. However, I would agree that Toronto won this deal for several reasons. First, and perhaps most importantly, for any franchise looking to get back into serious playoff and title contention, is that they traded away one of their key expiring pieces for a worthwhile package, opposed to getting pennies for him at the deadline, or even worse, potentially nothing in free agency. Instead, they have one player guaranteed to be with the team for at least another 4 years on a reasonable contract, and another player they have the rights to for another season and a half at minimum. Now, in a perfect world, the Raptors would have offloaded Anunoby a year earlier and allowed themselves to get several first round picks in the deal, as was originally thought would be the return for one of the best defensive players over the last few seasons, but that clearly did not happen. Whether or not a deal with multiple first round picks would have also come with the likes of proven players such as Barrett or Quickley is unknown, so I don't think Toronto holding on hope for one more season with OG as a core piece was a massive mistake by any means. That isn't to say the Raptors would not have been able to re-sign Anunoby, as they would have had his bird rights and could have given him a max contract in an effort to stay, but completely eliminating this possibility altogether is without question the smarter option. To make things better for Toronto, the trade, according to the Hollinger report, which is based on player efficiency rating, has Toronto gaining 6 wins from this trade, while the Knicks lose 7 wins. Now, looking at the Hollinger report alone is often bogus, and in reality, Tom Thibodeau may be able to help craft OG into a potential Defensive Player of the Year candidate and maximize the ability of a guy like Precious Achiuwa as well, who did average nearly 14 points and 10 rebounds in 12 starts last season, but those are also two what if scenarios the Raptors no longer need to take on. For Flynn, he has been a regular bottom of the league point guard since entering the league, finishing as one of the worst guards in the league in player efficiency in every single season he has been active. Even playing a bit better this year, he is well outside the league's top 30 point guards and is easily replaceable. It shouldn't be forgotten that the Raptors also did receive a 2024 second round pick in the deal, which happens to belong to the Detroit Pistons. So the Raptors will be selecting number 31 overall, which isn't far off from the selection spot of Achiuwa, Flynn, or Anunoby in their respective drafts. In other words, the Raptors should be able to replace at least one of these players with the pick fairly easily if they can't do it within their current system as is. Moving on now to the performance of each team this season. The New York Knicks are clearly the better basketball team. They're currently seventh in the Eastern Conference and above 500, while the Raptors are out of a playoff spot and 7 games below 500. Where the Knicks have stood out from the Raptors is their depth, as they not only have the likes of Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle leading the charge for them on any given night, but also have had the likes of Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, Quentin Grimes, RJ Barrett, Immanuel Quickley, Mitchell Robinson, and Isaiah Hartenstein, who all could provide decent contributions on any given night. For the Raptors, on the other hand, it does feel like they are only 6 players deep on most nights, which causes them to struggle over a 48-minute game. Now, instead, the Raptors can have two 10-point plus scores coming off the bench on any given night as they play with combinations of the likes of Schroeder, Quickley, Trent Jr., and Barrett at the two guard spots. Before the trade, the Raptors are struggling massively offensively as they rank 21st in points per game, 24th in bench points per game, 26th in three pointers made, 27th in 3-point percentage, 2nd in overall plus minus, 24th in true shooting percentage, 25th in free throws made, and dead last in free throw percentage. Defensively, they haven't been much better, ranking in the bottom half in the league in opponent 3-point percentage, field goal percentage, opponent assist, defensive rating, blocks, points allowed in the paint, and other categories as well. Offensively, this trade should help the Raptors improve in most of those categories, as Quickley has been a very efficient shooter this year and is a perennial six-man of the year candidate. Barrett has no problem shooting at volume, and both men could draw fouls and shoot from the line very efficiently. This season, both men are shooting above 80% from the line this year, something only Dennis Schroeder is doing on more than 2 attempts at the line for Toronto. Hitting 3 to 4 more free throws per game may not sound like much, but for Toronto, this would bring them from a bottom 20 scoring team to a borderline top 10 scoring team overnight. When you compare the offense of Anunoby to Quickley and Barrett, Anunoby is actually the career best 3-point shooter of the bunch, but is being outperformed in terms of offense efficiency this year compared to Quickley, losing out in stats such as true shooting percentage, shot quality, shot creation, offensive load, and several other categories. Defensively is, of course, where the Raptors lose out, as every Toronto fan knows the defensive capabilities of OG Anunoby. In 2019-2020, he finished 8th in the entire league in defensive rating with a 104.3 rating. If he had the same rating this year, that would put him 2nd in the entire league. He is also 7th in steals in the NBA since 2020 and was 2nd last year in half-court defense against All-Stars, behind only Mikal Bridges. This gives the Knicks a much-needed defensive wing asset they were clearly willing to sacrifice scoring depth for. With this being said, Anunoby's defensive rating has declined every year since 2019-2020 to the point where he is currently on par with the likes of Quickley and Barrett in this category. Under Tibbs, we could expect OG's defense will once again go to an elite level, but at the same time, it may reinforce that the Raptors aren't actually losing out as much as spectators may have initially thought on the defensive end. The last point that should be discussed as a win for the Raptors is that they acquired 2 players with valuable playoff experience. Both Quickley and Barrett have made 2 playoff appearances where they both saw massive improvements year over year in what they were able to do in the postseason. Both men averaged nearly 5 points more than they did in their second playoff appearance than they did their first. They also helped the Knicks win their first playoff season in a decade last year, and they hung around with eventual Eastern Conference champions, the Miami Heat, for 6 games. In the 2023-2023 playoffs, Barrett was a bucket, dropping 20 points or more in 6 out of 7 games from Game 4 of his first round series to Game 5 of his second round series. Now, that isn't to ignore the playoff contributions Anunoby has had for the Raptors, but having 2 proven scores in the playoffs should not be overlooked as well. So, as I said earlier, to call this trade a steal for the Raptors is a stretch, but I do think that they won this trade largely because of the certainty they gain, the risk they lose, and the immediate offensive improvements they will see to their team, which is desperately needed. Whether or not the team decides to keep the likes of Pascal Siakam and Gary Trent Jr. or also trade them for pieces that fit better within the new roster is still to be determined, but for Raptors fans, I think this is a very positive step in the right direction to avoiding a complete rebuild and getting closer to playoff contention once again. But what do you guys think? Is there a big part to the trade I or others are missing? Do you think the Raptors actually got a massive steal, or do you disagree altogether and think the Knicks won the deal? Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.